All good? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting. The committee will hear applications for minor variances and consents. We'll call each application by name and number and ask anyone who wishes to speak regarding that application to give their name to the secretary so it can be recorded. If you're not the applicant or agent and you wish to be notified in writing of today's decisions, you'll have to sign the clipboard at the back of the room. The applicant and agent will automatically be notified. And after today, there's a 20-day waiting period before the decision becomes final in order to allow time for appeals to the OMB. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? No? I have a motion by Dennis, seconded by Larry, that the resolved that the minutes of the Committee of Adjustment meeting held Wednesday, April 19th, 2017 be adopted as circulated. Are there any errors or omissions? Those in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Okay, so our first application then is BN 367. It's in the name of 657694 Ontario Limited. Anyone here for this application? Mr. Rowe? Anyone else? We'll have the planner explain the report then.
An application has been received to sever a parcel having a frontage of 53.2 meters and an irregular width, irregular depth, and having an area of 1.55 hectares as a boundary adjustment. The lands are to be added to existing industrial parcel located immediately adjacent to the east. The final lot size will be 6.55 hectares. The subject lands are 4.29 hectares in size and front onto the north side of Highway 3 in the former geographic township of Middleton. The lands contain two large buildings used for Titan Trailers manufacturing. The surrounding uses are generally agricultural and industrial and commercial in nature. For this application, no public input has been received, and therefore was not considered as part of the recommendation. The applicant recently submitted an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to add a site-specific designation to permit an industrial operation and rezone the subject lands from agriculture to general industrial. The application was approved in council April 14th, 2017. In regards to PPS policy, section 2.3.42 states that lot adjustments in prime ag areas may be permitted for legal or technical reasons. Community planning staff are of the professional opinion that the application to boundary adjust lands to expand the adjacent industrial operation use can be considered technical in that it's minor in nature. It does not create a new separate building opportunity. And furthermore, the boundary adjustment is considered for a non-residential use that does not compromise the specialty crop area and is located in a location that is practical for the industrial business expansion. Based on the configuration of the existing use, there is no immediate alternative locations with a lower priority agricultural land quality. The subject consent application is consistent with the PPS policies. The subject lands are designated agricultural in the Norfolk County Official Plan. Section 4.23A of the OP states that consent to sever land may be considered for the following reasons. One is that a technical reason, including minor boundary adjustments, which do not change the lot configuration such that a non-agricultural lot is created, that would not be in conformity with the policies of the plan. In this particular instance, in review of the entire Titan Trailers land holding and in consideration of the future planning policy framework for the subject lands, planning staff consider the proposed boundary adjustment application to be minor in nature. Industrial uses are permitted on the subject lands through a site-specific official plan designation. The boundary adjustment will not create an additional separate lot and does not change the lot configuration such that a non-agricultural lot is created. The subject consent application is in conformity with the policies of the OP. Subject lands are zoned general industrial with a site-specific provision. The proposed boundary adjustment application complies with the existing Norfolk County zoning bylaw general industrial zone. Planning staff are of the professional opinion the application is consistent with the PPS, conforms to the OP with respect to boundary adjustments and the agricultural designation. Planning staff recommend that this application be approved subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the planner? No? Dennis?
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. For application BN 367, it's been moved by Dennis, seconded by Rudy, that the committee hereby approves this application to sever a parcel with a frontage of 53.2 meters, an irregular width, an irregular depth of 206 meters, an area of 3.83 acres as a boundary adjustment, and the lands are to be added to the existing industrial parcel located immediately adjacent to the east, roll number ending in 18000, and the final lot size of that lot will be 16.19 acres. Conditions are outlined in the report, and the subject application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms with Norfolk County official plan regarding boundary adjustment within prime agricultural area, and that no public input was received, therefore not considered as part of this decision. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Our next two applications are BN 052, BN 053, both in the name of J&S Judge Farms Limited. Mr. Dixon's here. Is there anyone else here for these ones? We'll have the planner. I don't know if you're going to do one or two or however you want to do it.
I'll just be doing application ending in 052.
Okay.
Application has been received to sever parcel having a frontage of 39.09 meters, an irregular width of 46.25 meters, a depth of 78.37 meters, and having an area of 3,284 square meters, and retain a parcel having an area of 17.6 hectares as a severance of a dwelling made surplus through farm amalgamation. The subject lands front onto the south side of Wyndham Road 12. The lands contain a single detached dwelling and several accessory structures. The lands are part of a larger 17.8 hectare farm which is in agricultural production and contains an irrigation pond. Lands to the south are forested and to the north, east, and west are actively farmed. No public input has been received for this application and therefore was not considered as part of the recommendation. Subject application proposes to sever a residence surplus to farming operation as a result of farm consolidation. No active farmland is being taken out of production, and the lands can accommodate the existing sewage and water services. The retained lands will be rezoned such that a new residential dwelling is prohibited. The proposed surplus farmhouse dwelling severance is consistent with the policies of the PPS. Subject lands are designated agricultural in the Norfolk County official plan. The retained lands will be automatically rezoned such that a single detached dwelling is removed as a permitted use. Subject application will not adversely affect the operation or viability of the farm operation on the retained lot or adjacent lands, as it will function as an entirely separate lot. The existing barn is proposed to be removed as it is no longer required. In relation to section 4.23C and 4.23B, the proposed severed lot is in conformity with these policies of the official plan. And the subject lands are zoned agricultural in the Norfolk County zoning bylaw. The proposed surplus farm dwelling severance also complies with the provisions of the agricultural zone. The retained lands will be rezoned such that a single detached dwelling will be removed as a permitted use, as stated earlier. Planning staff do note there is a hydro line that crosses the front of the proposed severed lands that services the existing residential lot to the west. As a condition of approval, this hydro line will be required to be removed or have an easement created for its maintenance. In conclusion, it's the professional planning staff's opinion that the subject application is consistent with the TPS and conforms to the OP regarding surplus farm dwelling severances. Planning staff recommend approval of this application subject to the attached conditions.
Okay, thank you. Questions of the planner? Anyone? Anything you need to add, Rick?
Only if there's a question, Mr. Chairman.
I'll move it.
For application BN 052, it's been moved by Dan, excuse me, seconded by Larry, that the committee hereby approves the application to sever a parcel with a frontage of 39.09 meters and irregular width of 46.25 meters and a depth of 78.37 meters, having an area of 0.81 acres, and retaining a parcel with an area of 43.6 acres as a severance of a dwelling made surplus through farm amalgamation. Conditions are outlined in the motion, and the subject application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, the Norfolk County official plan with regard to surplus farm dwelling severances, and no public input was received, therefore not considered as part of this application. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the next one is same name, J&S Judge Farms Limited, BN 053. Is there anyone here for this one? Probably not. Have the planner explain the report.
An application has been received to sever a parcel having a frontage of 58.57 meters, a width of 58.57 meters, a depth of 65.14 meters, and having an area of 3,009 square meters, and retain a parcel having an area of 33.4 hectares as the severance of a dwelling made surplus through farm amalgamation. An easement for hydro and gas lines is also proposed to be established on the subject lands with a frontage of 3 meters, an irregular width of 3.3 meters, an irregular depth of 66 meters, and an area of 181.15 square meters. The subject lands are 3,809 square meters in size and front onto the north side of Wyndham Road 14. The lands contain a single detached dwelling and a detached garage. The lands are part of a larger 33.78 hectare farm, which is in agricultural production and contains 3 farm buildings. Lands to the south are forested, to the north and west are actively farmed, and to the east are residential. No public input has been received for this application and therefore was not considered as part of the recommendation. Official Plan Section 4.2.3, Agricultural Lot Creation and Lot Adjustment Policies states consent to sever land may be considered for a currently habitable dwelling existing prior to August 24th, 1978, surplus to a farming operation as a result of farm consolidation, subject to the policies of 423B and C. The existing dwelling was constructed prior to 1978 and is considered surplus to the farming operation. This section also allows for consents for technical reasons, including minor boundary adjustments, corrections of deeds, quitclaims, easements, or rights of way, or other purposes that do not create an additional separate lot. The proposed hydro and gas easement would not create an additional separate lot and is in conformity with the policies of this plan. Section 423B states as a condition of approval of a consent granted under Section 423A5, the county shall ensure that the land is zoned in the zoning bylaw such that no new residential dwelling shall be permitted on the retained agricultural lot. No consent shall be granted unless it is demonstrated that the severed lot will not adversely affect the operation or viability of the farm operation on the retained lot or any adjacent land. The retained lands will be automatically rezoned such that a single detached dwelling is removed as a permitted use. The subject application will not adversely affect the operation or viability of the farm operation on the retained lot or adjacent lands, as it will function as an entirely separate lot. There is a significant setback between the dwelling on the severed land and the barns on the retained lands. The subject lands are zoned agricultural. This zone permits a single detached dwelling and related accessory buildings. It is the professional opinion of planning staff that the subject application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the policies of the Norfolk County Official Plan regarding surplus farm dwelling severances. Planning staff recommend approval of this application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the planner? Rick, you good?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Marcel moves, seconder. For application BN 053, it's been moved by Marcel, seconded by Larry, that the committee approves the application to sever a parcel with a frontage of 58.57 meters, a width of 58.57 meters, a depth of 65.14 meters, an area of .94 acres, and retain a parcel with an area of 82.53 acres as a severance of a dwelling made surplus through farm amalgamation. An easement for hydro and gas lines is also proposed to be established on the subject land with a frontage of 3 meters, an irregular width of 3.3 meters, irregular depth of 66 meters, and an area of 181.15 meters. Conditions are outlined in the motion, and the subject application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and Norfolk County official plan with regard to surplus farm dwelling severances, and no public input was received, therefore not considered as part of the application. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Our next application is ANP 049 Sunfield Homes Simcoe. And you are, and I assume some other people want to speak. Anyone? Okay, first gentleman in the yellow shirt. Beside him. Anyone else? We do have a letter here from a couple people. No one want to speak? It's like, got to tell me now if you do. All right, that's fine then. We'll have the planner explain the report.
An application has been received to construct a commercial building with second-story residential requiring relief of 1% from the maximum permitted lot coverage of 22% to permit a lot coverage of 23%. 2 residential units from the maximum permitted number of 2 units to permit 4 units, and 5 parking spaces from the minimum number of spaces of 23 to permit 18 parking spaces. The subject lands are 1,604 square meters in size and front onto the south side of Evergreen Hill Road and the east side of Queen Street South in the urban area of Simcoe. The lands are currently vacant. Higher density housing in the form of townhouses, semi-detached dwellings, and apartment buildings are located to the north, south, and west. Lands to the east are vacant but will be developed with semi-detached dwellings in the near future. Public input was received after this report was finalized and will be addressed later in my presentation. The applicant is proposing to construct a 2-unit commercial building with 4 residential apartments on the second story. Section 1.1.3.1 of the provincial policy statement states settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development, and their vitality and regeneration shall be promoted. Section 1.1.3.2 states land use patterns within settlement areas shall be based on A, densities in a mix of land uses which efficiently use land and resources, are appropriate for and efficiently use the infrastructure and public service facilities which are planned or available, and avoid the need for their unjustified and/or uneconomical expansion. Minimize negative impacts to air quality and climate change, and promote energy efficiency. Support active transportation, are transit supportive where transit is planned, exists, or may be developed, and are freight supportive. And B, a range of uses and opportunities for intensification and redevelopment in accordance with the criteria in policy 1.1.3.3 where this can be accommodated. The subject application proposes to establish a mixed-use commercial residential building. It is within an existing high-density neighborhood and would support active transportation as is within walking distance of many residential uses. The subject application is consistent with the PPS. The subject lands are designated urban residential in the Norfolk County Official Plan. Section 4.7.1L states small-scale neighborhood convenience commercial and personal service uses to serve the daily shopping needs of a neighborhood shall be permitted, subject to the policies of Section 4.7.2D. The intention of the official plan is to allow for commercial uses that serve the surrounding neighborhood without resulting in disruption to residents. This application proposes to establish a takeout restaurant and convenience store with residential uses on the second story. The subject application maintains the intent of the official plan. The subject lands are zoned neighborhood commercial with special provision 14.815 in the Norfolk County zoning bylaw. The applicants have requested relief from the following provisions: 1% from the maximum permitted lot coverage of 22% to permitted lot coverage of 23%. The maximum permitted lot coverage in the CN zone is generally 35%. However, it was reduced on this property to 22% through a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. An increase of 1% when generally 12% more coverage would be permitted is appropriate in this situation. The next area they've requested relief from is 2 residential units from the maximum permitted number of 2 units to permit 4 units. The intention of the zoning bylaw in this case is to maintain a low-density use within a developed neighborhood. However, in this case, the surrounding neighborhood is somewhat high density with many multi-unit residential dwellings. The proposal matches the character of the neighborhood. 5 parking spaces from the minimum number of 23 spaces to permit 18 spaces has also been requested. The types of commercial uses proposed, takeout, fast food, and a convenience store, do not require parking for long lengths of time, and as such, it is anticipated that the proposed 18 spaces will be appropriate in this situation. A high amount of foot traffic can be anticipated due to the close proximity to Holy Trinity Catholic High School and the higher density neighborhood. Increased walkability should result in less required parking spaces. The apartments will be small and are not expected to require multiple parking spaces per unit. Staff have completed a site inspection and are of the opinion that the requested relief is minor and appropriate in this instance. The area is suitable for an increased number of apartments due to the high-density character of the neighborhood. Adequate parking will be available on the subject lands, and the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The concerns that were raised by members of the public should be in front of the committee members. They can be summarized as follows. So the first concern is traffic. This property is subject to site plan control, and we have received a site plan application in the last couple days, and a traffic impact study is required as part of the site plan application. So through that study, it will identify whether there are any issues, and if there are, how they will be mitigated. And as I mentioned previously, a large amount of foot traffic is anticipated, and 2 additional apartments in addition to the 2 that are already permitted are not anticipated to affect traffic patterns significantly in the area. There was a comment opposing commercial generally on the site, but this property is zoned for commercial regardless of whether they get a variance or not. And there was comment that the high density nature of this development is not appropriate. Staff are of the opinion that the increase of 2 units to 4 is not a major increase, and it's not super high density housing like an apartment building generally could be, and they will be smaller apartments, so there won't be full families living in them most likely. So there will be less requirements for parking. The neighborhood is higher density, which makes this appropriate in this location, and it matches the character of the area. And provincial and county policies call for increased density and infilling, and this is a good opportunity to meet those policies. It is the professional opinion of community planning staff that the requested relief can be considered minor in nature, appropriate development, and generally meets the intent of the Norfolk County Official Plan and Norfolk County zoning bylaw. As such, planning staff support this application and recommend that it be approved.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the planner? Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember a couple of years ago, there was some thought to a stoplight at this corner, and it was decided that one wasn't necessary. With this proposal, is it likely that a stoplight would be part of the equation in terms of the site plan?
Through the chair, that would be suggested through the traffic impact study. So if the study implied that it was required, then that would be something that could be required there.
Okay. And just one further question. I know there's some concerns about the amount of traffic that flows out of that subdivision. Are there any plans, or is there any thought being given to open up Parker Drive at the other end in terms of traffic flow?
Through the chair, I don't know the answer. I can look into it though and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, do you know what the purpose was of the reduced lot coverage through the special provision? Do you know why that was there?
Through the chair, I couldn't find that. I looked into it, but I didn't see what it was, so I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry? Yeah, he asked why they needed it to be, the coverage to be increased by 1%. But we don't know the answer yet. We will find the answer out from Mr. McFarland in a minute. Okay, so we're going. Dan?
I'm not sure that there's an issue here, but it seemed like the building inspector was questioning the calculations for parking, but yet he reached the same conclusion, being reduced to 18 spaces. So what is this all about then? Can you tell me that?
Through the chair, I think he was just not sure on what category of restaurant the proposed takeout restaurant would fall under, so he was suggesting it could be a different number. So in one case it wasn't deficient and in one it was. So we're just going with the deficiency just to ensure that that's covered.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Whibley?
Thank you. Excuse my voice, it may fade through all this, but I'm a victim of what everybody else in the community has had for the last several weeks. So, anyway, I'm here representing the Harvest Glen Residents Association. We have several concerns about the application. I will talk to one general, one specific, and David will talk about how it impacts 409 Queen Street, which is the adjacent property. This corner is the main entrance to our community, and we've been quite proud of it over the years. However, we are not so proud today because we have an unfinished project that's been underway for 5 years or more by this applicant, and there doesn't seem to be any move to finish it. So what we're deathly afraid of, we're going to have 2 corners with unfinished projects on them. So we'd like some, I guess I've lost the word, someone to tell us that site will be finished in an appropriate time, both of the sites. And we would invite the members of the committee to go down and have a look at the property at 409 Queen, and you'll see, or 410 Queen, and you'll see exactly what it is that we talk about. So, my other specific problem is with a driveway on Queen Street, coincident with, I believe it's the second application ago by this applicant. We saw fit to remove parking on both sides of Queen Street for about 300 meters on each side. Now we're talking about bringing a driveway out within 30 meters of the stop sign, and I don't believe that that's a safe way to do things. I remember when we know that it's illegal to park within 30 meters of a stop sign because some of us got tickets there when we first moved into the place. So we're quite worried about that, and we would like some assurance that the current property will be cleaned up before anything goes ahead. So.
You're talking about the other corner?
Yes, the other corner.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Baldock.
I'm very new at this, so if I appear a little nervous, I am. Thank you. Testing. We have a difference of opinion, I guess, in terms of what a minor variance is. When you change 2 units to 4 units, you've doubled the amount that's been asked for, and that's a 100% increase. That's not a 1% or a 2% a minor increase. It's a lot in terms of what the value is. However, see, I've already made a mistake. When I first heard that I was being asked to speak, I said I better get some notes. So I made some notes. I had 9 points. Well, then the file number report came out, and there were 8 pages with diagrams and everything else, and I like to go over things, so I went through it carefully. So if you've got the 8-page report there, I'd like to address a number of the items. So number 1 was under the first page, it says reason, and it says minor in nature. So is there a definition of minor in nature, or is it just sort of, we think it's minor, so it's minor?
Through the chair, there's not an equation for what is minor. It's relative in every situation.
Thank you. Okay. Going to the further down that page, when we're talking about parking, you've already asked a few questions about the parking. It seemed to me in the first section where it says parking calculation is unclear, if you don't have the extra housing there, then the parking for the commercial establishments would seem to be fitting. So by putting in the housing, then he has to, or the applicant has to bend the rules a little bit in order to make this work, is the way I see it. Okay, continuing with parking, if we could get up on the overhead there, the diagram that's page 6, is that possible? Thank you. I notice on the right side of the property, as you're looking up here, so the east side, there's a boundary between the parking area of where it has the 30.16 written in white. There's a boundary there, a border of no pavement between the housing and the pavement. There doesn't seem to be a white area along the south boundary. And I'm wondering if that diagram is misleading, or is that the way things are supposed to be? Should there be a boundary along the south boundary of buffer before the tarmac?
Through the chair, I don't believe they have to have grass there. There is a requirement of a setback between a parking lot or a parking space and adjacent residential, so they'll have to maintain that, but it can be paved. I think it might have to be paved here in order to get the width of the drive aisle that they require.
So this is not called parking lot here where they're driving in. So these parking spots on the other side are what have to be 4 meters away?
I'm not sure I understand. So the parking on the east?
No, the parking on the north, the parking on the south side of the building.
It does have to be a certain distance, which it meets there, but so that entrance with the driveway has to be, I think it's 7.3 meters wide, and I think they just made it there. That's why they can't have a grass section, because they need it for driving on.
Okay, during the site plan application, or the site plan then, they would be expected to solve the problem of if they're plowing that and there's a fence right along there, how are they going to plow that without damaging the fence?
Yes.
So there needs to be a buffer there somewhere. There's got to be at least a meter or 2 there. It can't be right on the property line.
I think it can be right on the property line. That's sort of up to the plow operator to not hit the fence.
This is another bending the rules committee. I hope that you can see that this application needs a lot of consideration before you accept the recommendation here. Going to number 3 of my points, which is the top of page 2, it says, note So this was by the building inspector. Note, the neighborhood commercial zone does not permit coverage to a maximum of 35%, or does permit coverage to 35%. Well, that statement seemed to be in conflict with page 4, paragraph 2. So if you can flip to page 4, paragraph 2, and I believe the planner had already mentioned this variation, but why do we have all this to confuse us? And again, it's just bending the rules as far as I can see. Okay, so there it says 35%. Here it says there's a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment that moves it back to 22%. So the building inspector apparently didn't know about that when he was making his assessments. I have a question about this. Why would this have happened? Why is there a 22% site-specific zoning bylaw?
Through the chair, there was a historic zoning on the property. I'm not sure why it was 22% that was put on there at the time.
Do you know what year it was that happened?
I feel like it was maybe 2007, but I can't say for sure.
Okay. I don't know, again, I don't know all these things. I'm just trying to do the best I can here. But you can notice on the diagram where the parking lot is, there are 2 houses set aside. This developer came a while back and managed to get those severed off. The 22% is not connected with those at all then? You don't believe? Okay, so why it's 22%, we don't know. Again, why wasn't this site kept all commercial? Again, the applicant has decided to bend the rules a bit. Instead of having commercial down at that end, he managed to talk a minor variation into having housing down there. And now he's trying to squeeze his commercial into one corner when he could have had the whole site to have a really nice commercial. And actually, those things haven't been started yet. So it could be possible that if this is not accepted, he may change his application again and go back and say, gee, I'd like to do a nice commercial thing here and not have it squeezed in with apartments or with the other semi-detached. I'll try to get going faster here. Okay. So I'm down to, okay. The most important thing as far as 409 Queen Street is concerned would be the privacy issue that the second floor apartments pose. If you've got a commercial building and they put this as a second floor, then those windows are going to be looking right down onto our units number 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are just below the black line on the diagram there. So that's a major concern for us. Again, these things are, it depends on your point of view. It's been said here that the density of this area is high density, and therefore these extra apartments shouldn't be a big problem. Well, again, this developer has managed to massage the rules. The southwest corner, so across the street from us, so where the driveway is going to the left there, that area was originally not to be as high density as it is, but this developer managed to talk people into having that particular higher density there. We certainly are not single-family homes where we are, but we don't need more people here. We're having enough, we have enough dogs circulating in the area and other traffic that we don't need more here. So to say it fits the community, no, it doesn't. It's adding to a community that is trying to hold back from being a heavy density community. Okay. I don't have anything, it hasn't anything come up here, I don't have any facts and figures, but certainly noise abatement would be an issue. If this restaurant has some kind of offering that has an odor to it, then smell abatement would be a big concern for these people, or for ourselves. I'm living there as well, but I'm across the way, so I'm not going to see this as much as the people who are on the north side of 409 Queen Street. So the overall theme is I would hope that you would not approve this, because this is not in keeping with our community, and we don't have a lot of confidence in this developer to work with us to make it in keeping with our community. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. That was all the speakers, right? No one, there was no one else? Mr. McFarland? A couple of questions came up there. Do you want to take a run at them?
Specific questions?
Well, yeah, it's why 4 apartments instead of 2?
That's the developer's desire. He feels it's marketable, and as it's been shown, I think it falls within good. Pardon me? Okay. It's what the developer wants. He's the one developing the land and putting up the money, so on. It's, I think, been proven it follows good planning practices, which was shown in the report. I think some of these objections will be nullified during the site plan process. Certainly the traffic will be addressed with another traffic study. There was one done a number of years ago, but there is another one required for the site plan, so that will be looked at during the site plan approval. As far as the lot coverage, I think that was demonstrated that it was much higher at one point, and it was reduced through a zoning, and we're slightly over that now, so I don't think the coverage is an issue. Your concerns about the noise from, or the smells and noise from the restaurant, at this point, we have no idea what it's going to be, and again, I think that would come up during the site plan. There'd be more specific development information at that point. And I don't know what the other questions were. I mean, the building meets the height requirements in the zoning bylaw, so I don't know how else we could address that other than a higher privacy fence between the 2 properties.
Okay, Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, a question to the applicant, or at least the agent, if I may. This commercial structure, in addition to having a restaurant, is it going to have a convenience store type of operation as well?
Excuse me, through the chair, my understanding is it's not going to be a restaurant, it's going to be a takeout facility. Well, there'll be no restaurant seating per se.
Takeout slash
Yes.
convenience store?
Yes, it'll be 2, my understanding is it's 2 separate tenants. They'll be looking for a tenant to operate some sort of a fast food takeout restaurant and another tenant to operate a convenience store.
Okay, thank you.
Further to that, Mr. Sunfield at some point, and it was a number of years ago, did some sort of a survey in the community or in the area and decided through that information that a convenience store was a desired thing by the local residents, and that's one of the reasons he decided to put it in there. So.
Okay. It's unusual, Mr. Whibley, but you have been trying to get my attention. I'll give you one shot here. Did you put up your hand? What did you? You have
a minimum requirement between properties along the south fence? I can't believe that we would have to put our fence at the mercy of a snowplow. That doesn't make sense at all.
Through the chair, there's a minimum setback for parking lots, so I will look into that at site plan, and they have to meet it. So it's usually setbacks are for structures, but I will make sure that they meet any required setbacks in the bylaws.
Not the parking lot, but the driveway.
I don't think there's a setback for driveways, but they will likely be putting up their own fence as well, if that's any consolation in that regard.
Okay. Does anybody, Eric?
The only thing I'm struggling with is this comment from the building inspector that the second bullet point under section 4.23E for commercial properties, no parking lot shall be located closer than 4.5 meters from any interior lot line abutting a residential zone. So to me, that means that parking lot and that last parking space for the garbage enclosure may not be permitted, and they won't have enough parking.
Matt?
Yeah, just through the chair, I think building's interpretation is that the parking lot is located to the north of that drive aisle, and the parking on the east that garbage enclosure, they haven't dimensioned it out for how wide that would be, but you're right. Like, it would have to be, the parking would have to be 4.5 meters from there. So those details are all going to come out through the site plan process. And of course, the applicant is going to have to comply with the zoning bylaw. If they don't, they'll be back before this committee requesting relief again. But no, we'll be making sure that those buffers are provided as per our zoning bylaw.
Good. Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, I guess just further to that, are we confident that with the buffers required and the setbacks and so forth, that we're still going to get 18 parking spaces?
Through the chair, I think they will, and otherwise they'll have to reconfigure the building potentially or lay out the site differently, and they can't go beyond what the relief they've requested today. And if there's been an error on the applicant's part in how it's been laid out, then we'll have to come back to the committee.
Excuse me, through the chair, I would suggest when this was initiated, there was a zoning deficiency form filled out through the building department.
Yes.
And if there was any further concerns as far as deficiencies, that would be the time that would come up. The basis of the variance was based on that deficiency form, so.
Well, I'm sure the numbers are good. We wanted to make sure if they're not good,
Yep.
there was recourse on our behalf, and that's what we found out, that there is recourse for us, so.
Good.
Marcel?
I'm just wondering, there was comment that construction was taking so long on the other side. Is there a time frame there? This isn't going to take another 5 years or something, is it?
When you got the two lots severed off of that some time ago, a year and a half ago, whatever, we had a familiar story from Refrain about not finishing projects. Most of the complaints at that point were about the builder, and I think we were kind of half reassured that he was going to do better, but I understand he hasn't done better. It's not our place. We can't force him to do anything on that other lot, but could you explain to us what he's up to?
I can certainly try. You're talking about the two new lots to the east that were created, or the lots?
No, the project across the corner, I believe. Is that right, Mr. Whibley?
Well,
No
we're
comment?
talking history now. I mean, yeah, I know it's been a struggle. I mean, sales were part of it. Financing's always a part of it. I don't know the whole story behind it. I do know that if things don't get approved and moving on this, it'll stay the way it is as well. So, I mean, he has to be allowed to move on, to develop. I understand people's frustration, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Okay. Anyone else got anything for Mr. McFarland? Also, somewhere here, there's a letter from I've seen one here. I don't know what I did with it. There was a letter of objection from one of the neighbors here too, right? 4? And I'm sure we've all read them, and they kind of resound what we've heard in person too. Mr. Turner, yeah, I have a copy, yeah. I have it. Yeah, I read it, thank you. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go to committee discussion, unless you want to add something.
No, you're done with me?
All
Thank
right,
you.
then it's up to the committee to decide what to do at this point now. Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, when the commercial parcel was downsized a number of years ago, with the view to housing, I guess, to the east, there was only one place where the commercial could go, and there was some concern about that. It was in the proposed location, as opposed to perhaps further to the east. So when council made that decision to, I guess, downsize that commercial site, it would have been with full knowledge that in the future, when commercial does transpire on that property, it can only go in one place, where it's being proposed at this time. Now, whether that's the right design for this property, that's another question. But in terms of location, it can only go there based on that zoning change that was made a number of years ago. So, just a comment on that.
Okay. Well, what they're asking for, let me find the motion here, is relief of, they're allowed to have 22% coverage, they're asking to have 23% coverage. 1% is what they're asking to increase. They're allowed to have 2 apartments above the commercial establishment. They're asking to have 4 small ones instead of 2 bigger ones. And then they're asking for permission to have 5 less parking spots than what the bylaw would say. None of those things are earth-shattering. We deal with these kind of requests all the time. If you feel it's minor, then I guess that's the way it is, and it isn't. I guess again, no definition for that. So, but it's what committee wants to do. How you feel about these measurements, and how much different this development is than what could be put there without these measurements, without these reliefs. So. Some people can say that these reliefs are going to cause a commercial building to be put there. These reliefs aren't going to cause a commercial building to be put there. One can be put there now. So it's just, in this case, they need a little relief. So. Someone. Dan?
I'm just thinking out loud here. And similar to Eric's point, the 4.5 meters from any interior lot line abutting a residential zone, that's the parking lot, right? If we were to apply that literally, that knocks out the garbage bin and 1 parking space. However, if they build a fence there, a 6-foot-high fence, who's going to care about whether the garbage bin is right next to the fence, right? So that's the way I'm looking at it. And I'm looking at that site plan, for instance, the way it is now. That's a driveway. There's nothing to say the driveway can't be, and I think Alicia said this, it could be right to the lot line, as far as the driveway goes. So whether it's no matter what you call it, if it's right up against the fence, whether it's a car space or whether it's a garbage bin, I really don't care what you call it. If it's paved, you can use it for one or the other.
I think there's no structures allowed within 4.5 meters of that fence. Is that right? But if it's just a driveway along that, that's not a structure. Cars can pass, so they could be closer than 4.5 meters. Is that what I got earlier? Okay. So the parking spots aren't near the fence, they're away from the fence. So the drive-in area is by the fence. Right. Dennis.
Mr. Chairman, just with reference to the fence that would be, I'm assuming that would be along that property line, is there an issue with maintenance when it's right on the line?
As long as you can access it from your side of the fence to maintain it.
Okay.
Fences are always on the line.
So it's no different than in a residential area where you
Correct.
have one with a neighbor? Okay, thank you.
Again, I'll give you one shot.
Thank you. Perhaps the planner can comment on the level of the land, like where that parking lot, the southern boundary, and the property line between the 2 properties. Our level is about the level of the floor. Then this unit across there is a two-story. We need a one-story commercial outside. Thank you.
Just in real quick regard to that, they're allowed to have apartments on the second floor of this commercial building without relief, right? If it was only 2 apartments?
Yeah, through the,
Okay.
through the
So-
chair. Yeah, that's correct.
So all they're allowed to put apartments up there to begin with. They're just asking to have 4 small ones instead of 2 bigger ones. That's what they're asking for, not permission to put them up there.
Many people out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm just letting you know what they're asking for, because what we're dealing with is what's being requested, not something that's not being requested. So, Matt?
So, through the chair, planning staff would like after hearing some of the comments from tonight, planning staff would like to recommend deferral of this application so that